Hey, it's Greg. Are you thinking about starting a farm and you're wondering how it's going to work out financially? Or maybe you already have a farm and you're looking for a way to track your income and expenses. Today, I'd like to share a spreadsheet that will help you do just that. And when I say share, I mean you ought to be able to download this spreadsheet, make changes to it, use it for your own situation, no strings attached. The spreadsheet is based on a YouTube video by Pete at Just a Few Acres Farm. His video is called Knowing the Numbers, and I'm going to leave a link to that in the description. Pete's video explains how he tracks his farm finances on a spreadsheet. And my objective here today is to make a similar spreadsheet available to you, including instructions here in this video on how to use it. And this is definitely a do-it-yourself kind of thing. Pete didn't buy that spreadsheet. He just created it, and you can do the same thing. And what I'm going to try to do here is get you started on that. So this spreadsheet includes fake numbers for income and expenses. It's not from my farm or anybody else's. I just made up the numbers. And so you're going to want to delete those and use your own numbers. In Pete's spreadsheet, he's got 5 enterprises: eggs, broilers, turkeys, pigs, and cattle. So I'm going to use those same in my spreadsheet, but your situation is likely different. And so you're going to want to add and remove enterprises as necessary. So if you're going to spend all the effort to create a farm, it would be nice to know how it's going to work out financially and whether you're going to make money. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to answer that question. How's it going to work out, and are you going to make money? All right, a couple of caveats. Your farm, as I said, will be different than what's in the spreadsheet. For example, I don't have anything in there on land, buying land or leasing land, so you're going to want to add that if that's for your situation. I also don't have a long list of infrastructure expenses like truck, tractor, wagons, fences. So depending on your situation, you're going to want to add those. Second caveat, I am not an accountant. I'm just trying to give you a jump start on tracking your finances. All right, why am I doing this? Because I'm trying to answer some questions about how to operate a farm. And here's some of the questions. How much money will your farm make? You know, going in, if you had a good sense for that, it would probably be a lot more comfortable. How much product do you need to produce and sell in order to make that money? How should you price your products? How much can you spend on expenses? See, the thing about expenses is if you know that they're coming, if you know what to expect, it's probably more comfortable than being surprised. And likewise on number 5, what types of expenses can you expect to incur? Again, if you know they're coming and you know that you're still going to be profitable, even though you pay the expenses, that's going to be more comfortable. And as you go through the year, how are you going to know how you're doing? Maybe at the beginning of the year, you had a budget and a plan, and you would like to track through the year how you're doing relative to plan. Ahead of plan, behind plan, it would be nice to know. Which products are more profitable and which ones are less profitable? You probably would want to invest more heavily in the profitable ones. What data do you need at the end of the year in order to do your taxes? And I think the spreadsheet's got a pretty complete set of data that are going to make your taxes easier, whether you're doing them or whether your accountant's doing them. And finally, how will you sell everything that you plan to produce? The spreadsheet doesn't answer that directly, but it does answer how much product you plan to make, and therefore that's what you're going to need to sell. So are you going to go to a farmer's market? Are you going to create a CSA? Are you going to sell off the farm? You're going to sell online? You need a plan for how you're going to sell it all. But the first question is, what are you going to sell and how much you're going to sell? So the spreadsheet does answer that question. All right, let's talk about the spreadsheet itself. I used Google Sheets to create this. So if you have a Google account, you ought to be able to use the link in the description to just copy that spreadsheet directly into your Google account and start using it. Start editing, and you're off and running. If you want to use Microsoft Excel, you ought to be able to use the link in the description to download. Google's pretty good at this, Google Sheets, to download an Excel sheet that's exactly the same as the Google Sheet. And then you're going to want to edit the enterprises, the budget, the income, the numbers, right, and make it your own. And I have color-coded the spreadsheet. The text, the cells in the spreadsheet that are blue are ones that you should probably be editing, and the ones that are black are mostly formulas, and so they should update automatically depending on what you put in the blue fields. All right, the spreadsheet is mostly a bunch of tabs. There are 21 tabs. We're going to look at those in just a second. The main tab is called the Budget tab, and I added some notes on this one to explain the cells and what their purpose is. So as I move around and hover, you're going to see those pop up, those notes pop up. And the other point here is that that Budget tab is in the spreadsheet with everything else. In Pete's spreadsheet, he's got that Budget tab separate. I put them together because then it's easier to make comparisons between your budget and your actual. All right, with that said, we're going to go look at the tabs, and let's shift over here to the spreadsheet. Okay, here we are on the spreadsheet, and the main thing about the spreadsheet is that it's a lot of tabs. The tabs are listed across the bottom on this ribbon, and you can access any of the tabs by clicking this menu button over here, and it provides a list of all 21 tabs. You see that there is a budget tab and actual tab. Those are two summary tabs that are pulling from the rest of these enterprise tabs. So there's, for each enterprise, there are 3 tabs: an income tab, an expense tab, and a data tab. We have 5 enterprises, so that's 15 tabs for the enterprises. Turkeys, pigs, cattle, and then we have 2 farm expense tabs, an overhead expense and an infrastructure expense. And we have a common tab which has some strings on it that make the whole thing work. And we have a product price tab. So those are the 21 tabs, and you can access them by clicking this hamburger button over here and picking it, or you can pick them off this list. I have a scroll wheel on my mouse, and so if I'm hovering over this ribbon and I rotate that wheel, it rolls through this ribbon. This is the end over here, product prices. And so I can just move back and forth on the ribbon by rotating my mouse wheel. Or you can use these arrows over here to move the whole ribbon over one section. All right, so 21 tabs, 2 summary tabs in the front, 15 enterprise tabs, 2 expense tabs for the farm. Let's talk about this. This is the main tab called the Budget tab. It has budget information as well as actual information and a comparison between the two. And it's got the bottom line numbers. So this tab is intended to have pretty much everything you need other than the details, which are across the other tabs. All right, so let's just look at this quickly, get an overview of this one. This is the budget section. Again, the blue is where you would enter your budget numbers for the year. So these are the enterprises, the 5 enterprises, and you enter budget information. The actual information here, this is not blue, so this is being pulled from the other tabs, and this is a summary of all the enterprise actual numbers across the farm. Down here are the farm expenses, the overhead and the infrastructure expenses, budget, actual. Down here is the bottom line, the profit, the overall profit, and that leaves this section over here, which is basically a summary of the actuals for the overall farm. And it's nothing more than a copy of what's on this tab at the bottom down here. And we're pulling in here just so that on this one tab you have pretty much everything you need. What did you budget? What did you actually do? What are your farm expenses? What's the bottom line? So everything on this, this tab itself has everything pretty much that you need other than the details. All right, let's talk about how this comes to be. How do you use this spreadsheet? Again, each enterprise has 3 tabs: an income tab, an expense tab, and a data tab. So let's work with the eggs as an example. If you sell eggs, let's say you go to market on January 9th, 2019, and you sell $286 worth of eggs, you enter it on this tab. This is your egg income tab. You can record this by day, by week, by month, however you want to record it, and it's going to tally it at the bottom. And this is the fake data that I said that I put in. So I put in 50 weeks of sales data, and I came up with these numbers. We sold this many eggs on each Saturday in 2019 for a total of $15,751 in egg income for the year. All right, when you put it on this tab, it automatically gets pulled over to this tab, which is the actual tab. This is one of the two summary tabs. And so this has each enterprise on here. Here's the egg enterprise, broiler enterprise, turkey enterprise. And so for the eggs, we've got the income, the expenses, the profit, and the margin. This number right here is being pulled from this sheet that we were just looking at, the egg income sheet, 15,751, and that's the same number here. Okay, so you populate the income sheet, it gets pulled onto this summary sheet. And the same thing with the egg expenses. Here we are on the egg expense tab. Any expense that you have directly related to eggs, you would put here. So we've got chick purchases, we've got feed, we've got labels, egg cartons. You would put it here and it gets tallied. So for example, if we bought 280 laying hens at $2 a piece, that's $560. We put it on this sheet. And it tallies and it says for that year, we spent $8,540 on egg enterprise expenses. So we go back to our actual sheet, egg expenses, $8,540 is right here. Now that we have those two numbers, we can calculate the profit for the year for that enterprise. It's income minus expenses, $7,211. And we can calculate the profit margin, 46%. And that number is what is the percentage of this number relative to this number. So our profit, 7,211, is 46% of our total income, 15,751. And we do that same thing for each of the 5 enterprises. And then down here, we include in our farm expenses in these 2 categories, overhead expenses and infrastructure expenses. So we're pulling those from these 2 tabs. Here's overhead, here's infrastructure. Let's go back to our actual tab. We're pulling those numbers onto here. Yeah, maybe we'll go back to that real quick. Overhead, 4489, infrastructure, 9982. Let's go back to our actual tab, 4489, 9982. So we are pulling those numbers off of those 2 tabs. We're going to go enter the details there. We're going to put the totals here on this actual tab. And then we have a bottom line number here. If we have $78,000 in income, we have direct expenses of about $35,000 across those enterprises. And then we have farm expenses. In other words, these 2 numbers right here of 14.5. And that gives a total profit of 28,591. It's income minus these 2 expense numbers is the profit number for the farm. Okay, so that's how it works. You enter by enterprise, you enter income, expenses for each enterprise. You also keep track of your overhead expenses and your infrastructure expenses. Those get pulled onto this sheet. It gets tallied at the bottom here, and you get your total numbers. And we are also copying those numbers onto this sheet so that it's all in one place. And they are right here with some additional information. All right, with that in place, let's talk about this sheet a little bit more in more detail. This is the main sheet, the budget tab. And I said there's budget here, actual here, farm expenses here. So at the beginning of the year, you say, okay, we're going to do 5 enterprises. Here they are. And you're going to estimate how many units in each enterprise you think you're going to do. We're going to do 3,500 dozen eggs. We're going to do 600 broilers. And then you're going to estimate how much profit you think you're going to get per unit. And then we can multiply those two together. If you've got 3,500, $2 each, that's $7,000 in profit for eggs. Do that for each enterprise. Sum that up right here. That's $43,800 in enterprise profit in our budget. And then these are our actual numbers. And we're going to pull these numbers from the previous sheet, from our actual sheet. Remember, 15,751. We're going to pull that from right here onto this sheet, along with the profit number, our margin number. So we can see at a glance here, and this is our profit, our actual versus budgeted profit. If we look at this number compared to this number, we are $211 ahead. And so that's a good thing. But it's nice and easy to see how you're doing relative to your budget. You can also see the profit margin again by enterprise, and you can see which enterprise is more profitable. We see here that the poultry is more profitable than pigs. Pigs at 28%, poultry at 72, 73. So those are good numbers to know. And it sums up down here. Total income, 78,000. Total profit, actual profit, 43,000. Total margin at this point, not including the farm expenses, is 55%. And we are $700 behind our budget. But that's still a pretty good number. If you got that close, you'd probably be pretty happy. All right, so let's go down here. Again, budget numbers here for your farm expenses. These are expenses that are not particular to an enterprise. The insurance, the market dues, the gas, the bedding, these things are across the whole farm. And so we have 2 categories. Overhead, these are consumed within the year, and infrastructure, these are intended to last multiple years, and so you would depreciate them over years. And that's why you break them into 2 categories. Okay, so we've got a budget number of 6,000, 10,000, total 16,000, and then we are pulling from those 2 sheets, we're pulling the actual overhead and the actual infrastructure. We have a total here of 14,400, and that means that we've got $1,528 that we have yet to spend from our farm budget. We can spend another $1,500 and not go over our budget for these expenses. And then we have a bottom line number down here. It says that we had budgeted profit of 27,800. We actually did 28,500. So we are $791 ahead of budget. Again, to be that close would be really nice. These are fake numbers. And this is a summary, again, across the farm. This is our total income number, the same as this number right here. These are our total direct expenses, overhead expenses, our profit number, and our profit margin across the whole farm, including everything. So 37%. And that number is probably too high. In my fake numbers, I'm probably light on these infrastructure and overhead numbers. So this number is probably too low. Pete says that these things ought to be roughly a split in thirds. So you made some money. You ought to spend about a third on direct expenses, a third on overhead, and a third on profit. We're doing reasonably well here on profit. These other 2 are not balanced very well. But again, they're not real numbers. So that's fine. Okay, let's talk about these data tabs for just a minute. Each enterprise has a data tab. And the purpose for these tabs is to be able to come up with reasonably accurate fake data. Right? I told you that the data is fabricated, but I want it to be realistic. I want it to represent what would really happen. And so I did some research. I did some looking around and tried to come up with numbers that make sense. All right. For example, if you have 280 laying hens, and those hens eat 1/4 pound of feed a day, you need about 25,000 pounds of feed for the year. If that cost you 30 cents a pound, and again, I looked up numbers to make sure these were reasonable, you're going to spend about $7,600 on feed. And that's why in my egg expense tab, when I made these numbers up, I came up with $7,800 of feed for the year because I want it to be pretty close to this number. So I want it to be realistic. Same with the income. If you've got 280 laying hens and they lay something like 200 eggs per year, I guess, if you're lucky, you're going to have 56,000 eggs per year. And that means you're going to have 90 dozen per week, every week. That sounded a little bit high to me, so I said, well, let's say 70. Let's say we have 70 dozen. That's still 42,000 eggs for the year. And we have on our price list here, product price list, I think these are numbers that I got probably mostly from Pete, but online prices, they're probably pretty good. There's $4.50 for a dozen eggs. So let's go back to our egg tab here. And so I said, let's use a price of $4.50 for a dozen. If we're going to sell them for 50 weeks a year, total dozens per year is going to be 3,500. We are going to make $15,750 on eggs. So on this income sheet, I made up these numbers, and it tallies to about that same number. So I made sure that these numbers made sense relative to these numbers. That's what the data tabs are for, and there's one for each enterprise, and I'm trying to come up with real numbers for expenses and income. All right, let's see, one more thing to mention here, some of these tabs at the end. This common tab are just some strings that I use to glue the whole spreadsheet together. We don't have to worry about that right now. And the product prices, as I mentioned, I'm using those. So for example, if I want a price for beef, I can look at all these beef prices and look at an average. And the average across those is about $9. It's not a great number, but at least it gives us some idea of what beef is on average. And then we can use that number on our beef data sheet right here. $9 average selling price per pound for beef. Probably a little high, but a reasonable number. Okay, I think that concludes what I wanted to say here. Again, this budget tab is the big summary of everything. You can see the budget, the actuals, the overall farm. This really tells the story right here. All right, let's go for a minute back to here and see how we did in answering these questions. Remember, the motivation was to answer questions about the farm. Maybe if you're getting ready to start a farm, or you've got one and you're trying to get your handle on the finances, and the spreadsheet is intended to answer these questions. How do we do? How much money will your farm make? We've got a profit number. How much product do you need to produce? We've got numbers. If we want to hit some level of revenue, we've got numbers that we know how much we need to make. How should you price them? You can look at your competitors. You can look at market prices and pick a price, and you can put that in the mix and see how you come out in terms of revenue and profit. How much can you spend on expenses? Again, you can see if you're making that X number of dollars, you want some profit at the end. You got to be limited on what you spend money on. So you can't go out and buy a brand new tractor maybe right away. You have answers in the spreadsheet to how much you can spend. What type of expenses? I've got a pretty good list in there. Even on the infrastructure, I put a list of things that Pete didn't have, just to give you ideas on things where you might have to spend money. How are you doing throughout the year? On that main tab, we can look at the budget numbers compared to the actual numbers. Are we ahead or are we behind? So you can answer that question. Which products are more profitable? We've got a profit margin. You can just look at those numbers. You know that pigs were down at 28%, poultry was up around 70% according to our numbers. So that gives you an idea of which ones are more profitable. What data do you need for your taxes? You've got your income, you got your expenses, you got your profit, you got your overhead separated from your infrastructure. So you probably have a pretty good set of information there to do your taxes. And how will you sell everything? Again, that's up to you, but at least you know you're going to have to sell a lot of eggs. You're going to have to sell a lot of broilers, and then you can start thinking about how you're going to do that. All right, so I think the sheet does a pretty good job at answering those questions. All right, I think that is everything I wanted to cover. Again, there's links in the description for Pete's video, for the spreadsheet. Hopefully you can download it or copy it to your Google account, modify it, and use it for your needs. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, or you can leave a comment. I hope it's helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.